welcome back to the channel. Now, this one, I'm going to talk about why it's very important to understand the United States financial system and how it actually works if you are new to the whole system itself. And I'm going to begin with this. When people hear the phrase financial system, it can feel distant, almost like something that only matters to economists, politicians, or people on Wall Street. But the reality is, whether we realize it or not, every single one of us is operating inside that system every day. Every paycheck, every bill, every decision about saving or spending, it all flows through a structure that was built long before most of us ever started earning money. And for a lot of people, it appears to work just fine on the surface. You go to work, you get paid, you pay for expenses, maybe you save a little, maybe you invest a little, and so forth. Well, life moves forward. But at some point, many people, especially newcomers, start to feel like something is off. Like, despite doing everything they were told to do, they are not really getting ahead. And that's usually where this conversation begins, because the system itself may not be broken, but it also may not be designed to fully protect you as an individual. It's designed to function at scale. It's designed to keep money moving or support businesses, to generate tax revenue or create economic activity. And in that process, the responsibility of personal protection often shifts onto the individual. That's where the idea of build your own protection starts to make more sense. It's not about rejecting the system, but you have to understand it's well enough to navigate it intentionally and know where to go about. So if we step back and look at how money flows through a typical household, it becomes a little clearer. You earn income, usually through a job or a business. Before that money even reaches you, a portion is already redirected through taxes. Then once it hits your account, it gets allocated again. Housing, transportation, food, insurance, debt payments, subscriptions, unexpected expenses. What's left, if anything, becomes savings or investments. And for many people, that leftover amount can feel smaller than expected. Not necessarily because they're doing something wrong, but because the structure itself has multiple points where money is being pulled away. Now, none of that is inherently bad. Taxes fund public services, businesses provide value, the economy depends on participation, but it does highlight something important. If all of your financial movement is reactive, meaning you earn, spend, and repeat without a clear structure, then you're essentially relying on the system to take care of you over time. And for some people, that may work. But for others, especially when unexpected events happen, it can create vulnerability. And that's really where the concept of protection becomes more practical. Protection isn't just one thing. It's not just insurance, although there can be a component of it. It's more like layers. The first layer might be something simple like having access to liquidity, not necessarily a massive amount of money, but enough to handle short-term disruptions without immediately going into debt. Because what tends to happen is when there's no cushion, even small disruptions can create long-term setbacks. Another layer could become income protection. And this is where things get interesting because most people are heavily dependent on one single source of income, your job, which is fine, but it also means that if that income stops or is reduced, everything else starts to unravel. So part of building protection may include thinking about how stable that income really is and whether there are ways to reinforce it or diversify it over. Then there's risk protection. That is where tools like insurance come into conversation, but it's important to approach it correctly. Not from a place of fear, but from a place of planning and looking forward thinking in a few years, even decades. And there's some countries that plan for like 100 years, like China. Okay, so the idea is not to assume something will go wrong, but to recognize that if it does, there's a system in place to absorb that impact and give you that cushion you need. Especially if you have a family, your wife doesn't want to worry because that's all she does is worry, especially if she has the kids. So as a male provider, you have to make sure you have these things intact. And different people will approach this differently depending on your situation, your goals, and your comfort level. And there's also a tax layer, which a lot of beginners aren't fully aware of at first when coming to the United States. Not in a complicated sense, but just in understanding that where money is placed or how it grows can affect how much is ultimately kept. And over time, even small differences there can compound in meaningful ways. Again, this isn't about avoiding taxes or doing anything extreme. It's just about being aware of how the system interacts with your decisions. And then there's the long-term layer, the part that's connected to things like retirement, legacy, or future planning. This is where consistency matters more than intensity. It's not usually about making one perfect decision. It's about building a structure that can hold up over time, even as life changes. Now, for someone who's just starting out, this might sound like a lot. And that's fair because it's a shift in perspective. Most people were never really taught to think about money this way. It was more like get a job, work hard, save what you can, and things should work out. And for some people, they do. But for others, especially in a changing economy, that approach may not feel as reliable as it once did. So instead of trying to do everything at once, it may make sense to start with awareness. Just understanding where you currently stand, where your money is coming from, where it's going, and what, if anything, is protecting you if something changes. Because once you see that clearly, the new steps tend to become more obvious. And it's also worth saying this. Building your own protection doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. There are professionals, tools, and strategies that can support that process. The key is making sure that whatever path you take aligns with your situation and your goals, not just something that sounds good in theory or looks appealing online. At the end of the day, the financial system is something we will participate in. It has its strengths, it has its limitations, and it's consistently evolving. But within that system, there is room for individuals to be intentional, to be structured, to reduce risk where possible, and to create a level of stability that isn't dependent on external factors. And for a lot of people, that shift from simply participating in the system to actually understanding and navigating it can be a meaningful difference over time. So if you're just starting this journey, don't feel like you have to have everything figured out right away. You don't. Most people don't. But even beginning to ask better questions, to look a little closer at how things work, that's already a step in a different direction. And from there, you can start building something that's not just reactive, but intentional. Something that's designed not just to function within the system itself, but to protect you, as an individual, your family member, or your business one step at a time. So for newcomers, have a great day. And if you have any questions, you can find my information in the description. Take care. Bye.